Daniel Walker stepped off the shuttle and into the busy corridors of Arvallis Prime, the largest galactic station in this sector. It was a place where hundreds of alien races traded goods, exchanged knowledge, and made deals that shaped the galaxy's future. Humans were still new here, not fully trusted by most species, but Daniel had been sent by Earth to represent his people in a very important trade negotiation. He walked calmly, his black diplomatic uniform neat and clean, carrying only a small data pad. His mission was clear: secure a fair agreement with the Galactic Council that would allow humans to expand trade routes without being overcharged or blocked by larger powers. As he entered the council chamber, his eyes scanned the massive room. The circular table in the center was surrounded by tall-backed chairs, each one occupied by a delegate from a different species. The air shimmered with the soft hum of translation devices, and a large holographic star map floated in the middle, showing trade routes in bright lines. Daniel took his seat quietly, aware of the stares. A few delegates nodded politely, but most watched him with curiosity and a bit of doubt. Humans were still considered young in the galactic community, lacking centuries of spacefaring history like the others. Among the delegates sat Talira of the Vulcan race. She was tall, with metallic blue skin and sharp, ridged markings along her cheekbones. Her golden eyes glimmered with confidence, and her long braid of silver hair hung over one shoulder. The Vulcan were known for their warrior culture, and Talira was one of their strongest voices in the council. She had fought in 3 wars and considered strength the only measure of worth. As the meeting began, the chairperson welcomed Daniel and explained the proposal from Earth. Daniel spoke clearly, outlining fair terms for trade and mutual cooperation, but before he could finish, Talira leaned forward, her voice cutting through the air. "Humans," she said with a faint smirk, "you speak of fairness as if it is owed to you, yet your people have no true power, no history in the stars. You arrived here barely 50 cycles ago, and now you expect to stand as equals among those who have ruled for centuries?" Daniel paused. The translation devices carried her words to every delegate in the room. Some looked uncomfortable. Others leaned in, waiting for his reply. Talira didn't stop. "I have read your history. You fought among yourselves for millennia, only to reach the stars with ships that break under real pressure. You boast of resilience. But what can resilience do when true power decides your fate? In a real conflict, your species would not last a week." A low murmur spread across the chamber. Daniel sat still, his hands resting on the table. His face showed no anger, no frustration, only calm. "Tell me, human," Talira continued, her tone sharper now, "what makes you believe you can trade with the great powers as if you are one of us? You have nothing to offer that we cannot build ourselves. Perhaps it is your arrogance that blinds you." The words hit hard. In another setting, a human might have snapped back, defended themselves with passion, or left in anger. But Daniel did none of those things. He simply reached forward, pressed a button on his datapad to end his presentation, and stood up. The room fell silent. "Is that all?" Talira asked, almost laughing. Daniel looked at her for a moment, his voice quiet, but steady. "You've said enough." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the chamber. The door closed behind him, leaving a heavy silence in the room. The council members looked at each other, unsure of what had just happened. Talira leaned back in her chair, thinking she had won. To her, the human had admitted defeat by walking away. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, but not everyone in the room shared her view. Ambassador Krivak of the Duerlan race, a long-lived species known for their wisdom, frowned deeply. He had dealt with humans before and knew their nature was not so easily measured. "You may have made a mistake, Talira," Krivak said slowly. She raised an eyebrow. "And why would that be?" "Because," Krivak replied, "humans are not like most species. They do not answer insults with words. They answer with actions. And when a human leaves without arguing, it is rarely the end of the matter. Talira dismissed his words with a wave of her hand. He will return. He must. Earth needs these trade rights more than we need them. I have simply reminded him of his place. But even as she spoke, a small doubt began to creep into her mind. Daniel's expression before he left had not been one of defeat. It had been one of calculation. Down in the lower sectors of the station, Daniel walked through the crowds, his thoughts focused and clear. Talira's words didn't anger him. They only confirmed what he already knew, that many in the galaxy saw humans as weak, unimportant, and unworthy. But history had taught him something very different. Humanity had been underestimated before, by nature, by war, by time itself, and they had always adapted, endured, and found ways to rise above. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As he reached his ship's docking bay, Daniel activated his private comm channel to Earth Command. His voice was calm, but his words carried purpose. "This is Envoy Walker. The council meeting didn't go as planned. I want you to send me the package." There was a pause on the line. "Sir, are you sure? That will get their attention." "Exactly," Daniel said. "It's time they see what we're really capable of." And with that, the first step in his quiet plan began. Daniel sat in the command chair of his small diplomatic transport, the hum of the engines steady beneath him. Outside the viewport, the traffic lanes of Arvalis Prime glowed with the lights of countless ships moving between docks and trade hubs. He had left the council chamber without another word to Talira or the others. Some might have called it walking away in defeat, but to Daniel it was simply the first step in a different kind of negotiation, one that didn't happen in the council's meeting hall. His comm screen flickered to life. A stern-faced officer appeared, her uniform marked with the crest of the United Earth Fleet. "Envoy Walker," she said, her tone formal, "we've received your request for the package. Do you have authorization?" Daniel leaned forward. "I have direct approval from Earth's diplomatic command. This is not retaliation, it's demonstration." The officer studied him for a moment before nodding. "Understood. The package will arrive in 2 days. And Daniel, this will make an impact." "That's the idea," he replied. He ended the call and sat back, letting out a slow breath. Humans had learned early in their dealings with the galactic community that words could only go so far. Respect, especially from the older, more powerful species, had to be earned, and sometimes earned in ways they didn't expect. Meanwhile, back in the council's private lounge, Talira reclined in her seat, her fingers tracing the edge of a carved metal cup. She was surrounded by a few allies from her own faction, who congratulated her on putting the human in his place. "He had no answer," one of them said with a grin. "Your words struck him down before he could even speak." Talira smirked but said nothing. The truth was, something about the way Daniel had left bothered her. There had been no anger in his eyes, no frustration, just a quiet focus. She had seen that look before, but not from humans. It was the look of someone who was planning something. Ambassador Kryvak entered the lounge, his tall frame and dark cloak making the room seem smaller. "You celebrate too soon," he said, his deep voice carrying across the space. Talira raised an eyebrow. "You think the human will return with more words? I will crush those too." "It will not be words," Kryvak said simply. "And if you're wise, you will pay attention when it comes." Talira watched him leave, her smirk fading. Down. In the lower levels of the station, Daniel spent the next 2 days in constant preparation. He met with engineers from the Human Trade Corps, reviewed station regulations to secure a large section of the docking ring, and made quiet arrangements for supplies and security clearance. Word began to spread. Whispers floated through the markets and corridors. The human envoy was up to something. Alien traders speculated about what it could be. Some thought he was calling in a warship. Others believed he was bringing exotic goods from Earth to sway the council. Talira heard these rumors, and although she told herself she didn't care, she found herself listening closely whenever his name came up. On the second night, as the station's artificial day cycle dimmed, a massive shadow appeared at the edge of the system. Station traffic control scrambled to adjust lanes as a convoy of human ships approached. Not sleek warships, but large industrial haulers, escort frigates, and a few smaller craft weaving between them. At the head of the convoy was a vessel, unlike any the station had seen before, a broad, flat structure with modular arms folded against its sides. Its hull was marked with the emblem of the United Earth Fleet's Engineering Division. In the control room of his transport, Daniel watched as the ships docked in the reserved section of the station. Workers and drones immediately began unloading. Massive containers, each one stamped with the words Earth Relief Systems. He didn't announce anything to the council. Not yet. Instead, he oversaw the quiet assembly of what looked like large structural frames. Cranes moved them into position, locking them together in orbit just beyond the station's viewport range. Smaller human craft darted between the frames, welding, sealing, and installing systems. By the next morning, a faint silhouette could be seen from the station's outer observation decks. The curious came to look, wondering what the humans were. Building in the council chamber, the murmurs grew louder. "Have you seen what the human envoy is doing?" one delegate asked. "I heard it's a weapon platform," another replied. Talira listened in silence, her mind working. She decided she would see it for herself. That evening, dressed in her formal armor, Talira visited the docking bay where the humans worked. She expected to see chaos, untrained laborers making slow progress. Instead, she was met with precise coordination. Human crews moved like parts of a single machine. Commands were short, tools were passed instantly, and no one wasted a second. Daniel noticed her watching from the observation platform but didn't approach. He simply nodded to her once before turning back to his crew. Talira stayed longer than she intended, her eyes drawn to the structure taking shape in orbit. Whatever it was large. Larger than any civilian installation she had ever seen built this quickly. When she finally returned to her quarters, she found herself unable to dismiss what she had seen. The human was not building a weapon. He was building something else. Something big. The next morning, a formal message from Daniel arrived in the council's secure communication channel. It was short and to the point. Presentation tomorrow. Observation Hall. All council members. Invited. Talira stared at the message for a long time before sending a simple reply. "I will attend." The day of the presentation arrived, and the atmosphere on Arvelis Prime was different. From the highest towers to the lowest market stalls, the talk was the same. The human envoy is going to show something to the council in the Grand Observation Hall. The council members took their seats. The room was built for official announcements and galactic ceremonies, with tall glass walls that looked directly into the black ocean of space. Banners of every represented species hung from the ceiling, their colors shimmering in the artificial light. Daniel was already there, standing at the center of the hall. He wore the same simple black diplomatic uniform, without medals or decorative markings. His calm expression gave nothing away. Talira entered with her usual confident stride, her golden eyes scanning the room. She noticed that the other delegates were restless, leaning toward each other, whispering. Even those who normally ignored human affairs seemed curious. "Good morning," Daniel began, his voice steady. The translation systems carried his words into every ear. "I asked you here because I believe words alone are not enough to show what humanity can offer. So instead, I brought a demonstration." He tapped his data pad. The hall's lights dimmed, and the transparent wall ahead of them shifted, its shielding clearing until the vast darkness of space came into view. At first, all that could be seen were the stars. Then, slowly, a shape began to emerge from the shadows, massive, metallic, and symmetrical. A structure that seemed too large to have been built so quickly. Gasps spread through the room. It was an orbital habitat, its curved sections glinting under the nearby star. 6 huge modules were connected, in a ring, with docking arms stretching out like the petals of a flower. Arrays of solar collectors shimmered along its spine, and its outer hull bore the insignia of the United Earth Fleet's Engineering Division. This, Daniel continued, is a mobile relief and support station. It can house 30,000 refugees, produce food, purify water, and provide medical care for entire colonies. It was designed to be built in disaster zones, quickly, with minimal resources. The one you see before you was assembled here in orbit in less than 40 hours, using human crews and technology. Talira's eyes narrowed. 40 hours. She knew that even the fastest Vulcan construction teams would take weeks to assemble, something a quarter that size. Daniel gestured toward the station. It's not a weapon. It's not for conquest. It's for survival. For the moments when people have nothing left, when they've lost their homes, their supplies, their safety. We send these stations to them, fully functional, ready to save lives. A soft murmur passed among the council members. Some leaned forward, studying the structure with new respect. Daniel's tone remained calm, but there was a quiet strength behind his words. Humanity knows what it means to be underestimated. We know what it means to face hardship without help. That's why we built this. We don't come to the table empty-handed, we come with solutions. As if on cue, several shuttles left the habitat and flew toward the station. Through the hall's glass wall, the delegates could see them approaching, each shuttle carrying samples of the station's equipment. Portable hydroponic gardens, automated medical pods, atmospheric processors. A small team of humans entered the hall, setting up displays for the council to inspect. One of the medical pods slid open, revealing a clean interior with systems already running. A hydroponic unit sprouted green plants in nutrient solution, the smell of fresh herbs filling the air. Talira watched closely, her earlier smirk nowhere to be found. She had come expecting something flashy or desperate, but instead, the human had brought something practical, efficient, and undeniably powerful in its own way. Counselor Draxel of the Kalari race spoke first. You assembled this in 2 days? Daniel nodded. With the right preparation, we can do it faster. Krivak, who had warned Talira earlier, let out a small chuckle. And you called them weak. Talira's jaw tightened, but she didn't reply. She continued to watch as more delegates approached Daniel, asking questions about energy output, supply chains, and adaptability for different planetary environments. He answered each one with quiet precision. After nearly an hour of demonstrations, the chairperson of the council stood. Envoy Walker, this is an impressive achievement. Your people have shown skill and commitment. The council will reconsider Earth's trade status in light of this contribution. A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber. The shift in tone was unmistakable. Where there had been doubt, there was now respect. Talira stayed silent until most of the council began to leave. When she finally approached Daniel, she kept her voice low so only he could hear. You could have argued with me in the chamber, she said. You could have tried to defend yourself with words. Instead, you brought this. Daniel met her gaze. Words fade, results remain. There was no arrogance in his tone, only truth. Talira found herself without a quick reply. She turned and left, her mind unsettled. From the observation deck later that night, she stood alone, staring at the habitat, floating in the dark. Its lights twinkled like a small city, a beacon against the black void. She didn't want to admit it, but she respected what the human had done, and deep down, she wondered what else they were capable of. The day after the presentation, The orbital habitat continued to draw attention from every corner of Arvelis Prime. Shuttles from dozens of species came to inspect it, engineers requesting permission to tour its systems, and traders wondering if such a station could be purchased. Daniel, however, didn't stay in the spotlight. After answering the Council's official questions, he quietly returned to his docking bay, letting the habitat speak for itself. In the Council lounge, the mood was different from just a few days earlier. Delegates who had barely acknowledged Daniel before now spoke of human efficiency and ingenuity. Some even discussed future collaborations. But not everyone was pleased. A few of the older powers, those who had controlled trade for centuries, saw the human achievement as a threat to their influence. If humans could build such advanced relief stations so quickly and at low cost, they could disrupt existing industries and political alliances. Among them was Lord Vren of the Kothari, a tall, insectoid being whose people controlled much of the Outer Rim supply network. He sat across from Talira, his multifaceted eyes watching her closely. "You were the one who spoke against the human," Vren said. "And yet now he is the center of attention. Tell me, Talira, will you change your stance so easily?" Talira sipped from her drink, her expression unreadable. "I spoke based on what I believed to be true. The human proved me wrong in some ways. But that does not mean I will blindly trust his kind." "Good," Vren said, leaning forward. "Because there is more here than a simple display of engineering. No species spends such resources without expecting something in return. Mark my words. The human's actions will have a cost." Talira didn't reply, but the thought stayed with her. She had to admit she was curious about Daniel's true intentions. Later that day, she found herself walking toward the human docking bay. She told herself it was to keep an eye on possible political moves, but deep down, she knew there was more to it. She arrived to find Daniel supervising the unloading of smaller supply crates from a transport. Unlike the massive cargo for the habitat, these were modest: food, medical packs, and clean water systems. "More gifts?" Talira asked, stepping closer. Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze without surprise. "Not gifts, commitments. The habitat was only the start. These supplies are for a colony hit by an asteroid strike last week. They'll be gone by tomorrow morning. You're using this as another show for the Council," she said, her tone sharper than intended. "No," Daniel replied calmly. "Most of the Council won't even hear about this. It's not for them." His answer caught her off guard. "Then why?" "Because they need it," he said simply, "and because humans don't wait for approval to do the right thing." There was no boast in his voice, just a quiet certainty that unsettled her more than open arrogance would have. She watched as his crew loaded the supplies back onto smaller shuttles. Each movement was efficient, purposeful, and without wasted effort. Talira turned to leave, but stopped. "You know," she said, "many believe you built that station to force the Council's hand, to get Earth what it wants." Daniel glanced at her, a faint trace of a smile on his lips. "Maybe it works both ways. Maybe doing something good can also achieve the right political result. The two don't have to be separate." His words stayed in her mind long after she walked away. That evening, a small emergency meeting of the Council was called. A mining colony in the unclaimed sector had sent a distress signal. A large radiation leak had made their habitat unsafe, and evacuation was impossible without help. The chairperson asked for immediate aid from member states. Several delegates hesitated, calculating costs and logistics. The colony was far from major trade routes and had no strategic value. Before the debate could grow, Daniel spoke. "The human habitat is already equipped to handle this. We can be there in less than 20 hours. Some looked surprised. "You would divert your new station so soon?" Counselor Draxel asked. "It was built for emergencies," Daniel said. "This is exactly what it's meant for." Within the hour, the Council voted to authorize the mission. As the meeting ended, Talira approached him. "You're willing to risk your entire demonstration project on a distant colony?" "It's not a risk," Daniel replied. "If it works as designed, the whole galaxy will see its value. And if it fails, then it wasn't worth bringing here in the first place." The next day, Talira found herself on the observation deck, watching the massive human-built station break from its orbit around Arvelis Prime. Its engines flared, and it turned slowly toward the distant stars, a small fleet of human escort ships falling into formation around it. She didn't understand why, but as she watched it vanish into the dark, she hoped it succeeded. The human-built station, escorted by its smaller fleet, traveled through the quiet black of space toward the mining colony. From the outside, it looked calm and steady, but inside, Daniel's crew worked around the clock. Every system was checked, every emergency bay prepared, and every crew member briefed on the plan. The colony's distress call had been short but urgent. A radiation leak from a damaged reactor had spread through several living sections, forcing thousands of residents into cramped safe zones with limited air and water. Without help, they would run out of supplies in less than 2 days. Daniel stood on the command deck, eyes fixed on the forward screen. His voice was calm as he gave instructions, but inside, he felt the weight of the mission. If they failed, it wouldn't just hurt the colony, it would prove the doubters in the council right. Back on Arvelis Prime, Talira couldn't get the mission out of her mind. Curiosity finally overcame her hesitation, and she contacted her superiors for permission to travel. They approved, seeing it as a chance for her to evaluate the humans' methods. Within hours, she was aboard a fast Valkan scout ship headed toward the same coordinates. When she arrived 2 hours behind the station, the scene before her was chaotic. The mining colony's outer sections glowed with the dull, dangerous shimmer of radiation leaks, and several smaller rescue ships hovered nearby, unsure how to proceed. The human station was already in position, massive docking arms extending toward the colony. A shielded tunnel connected the two, allowing evacuees to pass through without exposure. From her ship's viewport, Talira could see hundreds of small human craft moving in and out, some carrying medical teams, others hauling containers of purified air and fresh water. She docked with the station and stepped into a scene of controlled urgency. Humans moved quickly but without panic, guiding frightened colonists toward medical bays, scanning them for radiation sickness, and directing them to clean living quarters. Talira found Daniel near one of the medical pods. He was in a simple utility jacket now, speaking quietly to a group of colonists before moving to assist a technician with a damaged air recycler. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said when he noticed her. "I came to see how you handle a crisis," Talira replied. "So far, I'm not unimpressed." He gave her a small smile before returning to his work. "Good, because this isn't over yet." Hours passed. The human teams evacuated over half the colony's population while engineers worked to contain the leak. But then, a call came through. The reactor's remaining containment fields were failing, and a dangerous radiation surge was expected in less than 30 minutes. There was no time to move everyone. Daniel immediately called a meeting with the lead engineers and medical officers. "We split the station's shield projectors," he said. "Rotate them around the reactor core to buy us more time." "That will weaken our own protection," one officer warned. "Then we work faster," Daniel replied. "Every minute counts." Talira listened as he gave orders, noting how his crew didn't argue once the plan was clear. They simply moved, each person trusting the others to do their part. She had seen disciplined military teams before, but this was different. It wasn't about orders. It was about trust. Within minutes, a team of human pilots flew shield modules into position around the reactor core, reducing the leak's spread. Inside the station, medical staff worked in shifts to treat those already exposed. Talira joined one of the escort teams, helping guide the last groups of colonists through the docking tunnel. The air inside was tense. the hum of the radiation alarms constant in the background. As the final group crossed into safety, a deep shudder passed through the colony structure. The reactor's containment finally failed, and the shield field lit up in a bright flare as it absorbed the energy. In the control room, Daniel watched the readings. The shields held, barely, but long enough to save everyone left inside. When it was over, the mining colony was uninhabitable, but every resident had been evacuated. Later, Talira stood beside Daniel in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the wreck of the colony. "You could have left them for the council to deal with," she said. "You could have kept your station here, safe." Daniel shook his head. "Then what would it be worth? A station that never risks itself isn't worth building." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him for a moment before saying quietly, "Perhaps I was wrong about your people." Daniel glanced at her but said nothing. Sometimes silence was the most powerful reply. The return to Arvallis Prime was quiet at first. The human-built station moved slowly, escorted by its smaller ships, carrying thousands of rescued colonists. The lights inside glowed softly through the station's outer windows, a sign of safety and life after days of fear. Daniel walked through the main corridors, checking on the evacuees. Children played in the open areas, their laughter mixing with the hum of the ventilation systems. Medical teams moved calmly between patients, and the smell of fresh food from the hydroponics bays filled the air. Talira followed him, still wearing her simple Valkan uniform instead of ceremonial armor. She had stayed on the station for the entire journey back, quietly watching how the humans worked. "You haven't stopped moving since this mission began," she said as they entered a quieter section of the habitat. "Neither has anyone else," Daniel replied, glancing toward a group of engineers repairing one of the shield modules damaged during the reactor surge. "We all have our part to play." "But you're the leader here," Talira said. "You give the orders. Why do you work alongside your crew like an ordinary worker?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because leadership isn't about standing above others. It's about standing with them." Her eyes studied him for a long moment. The Daniel she had insulted in the council chamber seemed like a completely different man now. She had called him weak, unworthy. Yet here he was, calm and steady after leading a mission that had saved thousands. When they reached Arvallis Prime, the station docked with the main hub. The council had already gathered in the Grand Hall to receive them. The rescued colonists were given quarters and medical care within the station's protected sectors. As Daniel entered the council chamber, the atmosphere was completely different from his first visit. Delegates who had once watched him with cold curiosity now stood and greeted him. The chairperson raised a hand for silence. "Envoy Walker," the chairperson began, "your actions have been reported to this council in full detail. The successful evacuation of the unclaimed mining colony and the protection of its people under extreme conditions is a service beyond expectation. The United Earth Fleet has our gratitude." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Even those who had doubted humans now spoke quietly to one another about partnerships and alliances. Krivak, the Dorlan ambassador who had warned Talira earlier, leaned forward with a satisfied expression. "It seems your people are capable of more than most believed," he said. Daniel simply inclined his head. "Humans are at our best when we have a purpose," the chairperson continued. "Effective immediately. Earth will be granted full trade, rights within the Council's protected zones with equal standing among member states." There was applause, a rare sign of unity in the chamber. As the session ended, Talira approached him. There was no arrogance in her voice this time, only quiet sincerity. "I spoke without restraint that first day," she said. "I believed my judgment was correct. I was wrong." Daniel looked at her, his expression calm as always. "Everyone judges too quickly sometimes. What matters is what we do after. Then let me say this, Talira said, standing tall. You have earned my respect, and if the Valken ever find ourselves in need, I will remember what I saw here. Daniel gave a small nod. That's all I could ask for. Later, standing alone on one of the observation decks, Talira watched the human-built station remain docked at the edge of Arvelis Prime. Its massive ring gleamed in the light of the nearby star, a reminder of what had been accomplished. She thought, back to that moment in the council chamber when she had tried to cut him down with words. At the time, she had expected him to defend himself with anger or pride. Instead, he had turned and walked away. Now she understood why. It wasn't that he couldn't fight back. It was that he chose not to waste his strength on empty words. His actions had been his answer, and they had spoken louder than anything she could have imagined. In the weeks that followed, the station became more than just a symbol of human capability. It became a meeting point for cooperation between species that had rarely worked together before. Human engineers trained crews from other worlds in rapid construction techniques. Joint missions were planned to bring similar relief stations to frontier regions. Daniel kept a low profile, never seeking the spotlight. Whenever someone asked about the station, he always said the same thing. It's not about showing off. It's about being ready when someone needs help. Talira found herself returning to the station often, sometimes on official visits, sometimes without a clear reason. Each time, she left with the same quiet thought, that respect wasn't something given because of titles, power, or history. It was something earned, moment by moment, choice by choice, and the human had earned it.